Hi, I'm back and more chaotic than ever. Today, I wanted to talk about the menu because I watched it because someone recommended it to me and I found it to be fairly enjoyable, had some criticisms, and I wanted to talk about that. However, when I was watching it, it reminded me of another movie, a film I watched back in high school from the 60s. And when I was writing the script of the video about the menu, I decided to rewatch that movie just to make sure if the comparison was just in my head or if there's an actual similarity there. And upon rewatching that movie, I don't think I can talk about anything else other than the other film because it's so much better. And I feel like just by going through the other film, you'll understand everything and anything I have to say about the menu. So I'm going to start this by walking you through a whole other movie. And I'm assuming if you've watched the menu, you'll understand every take I have on it. So the movie we're going to be talking about is The Exterminating Angel. And it's a 1962 Mexican surrealist film written and directed by Luis Buñuel. I'm butchering his name. I'm going to be butchering many names in this video. Bear with me. So you might have heard of Buñuel. He is a major surrealist director of the time, and I think he's most well known for having worked with Dolly on a few projects. I've watched a handful of his films and loved them, and I've read his autobiography. And he's not very fond of Dolly, to be fair. Not a lot of people were, so it seems like that collaboration didn't go very well. Anyways, I think this film is included in, I'm reading off the Wikipedia article, it's included in the best 1,000 movies ever made by the New York Times. So, yeah, let's get into The Exterminating Angel and discuss that. So, the movie starts off with a server named Lucas leaving the house he works at. We understand that there is going to be a big dinner party hosted at this house with 20 plus guests, and the server Lucas is leaving right at the beginning of the movie, which is strange. And there's a main server guy, a main butler called Julio, which is very prominent in the entire film. And he, goes up to Lucas and is like, "Why are you leaving? You can't leave. You're fired if you leave," or whatever. And he does. Lucas leaves. And immediately we have the iconic quote of the butler guy telling the other servers that there are many more Lucases in the world, and it doesn't matter that Lucas has left us. Foreshadowing. There seems to be a lot of tension right off the bat with the servers, and they're all talking about ways, trying to work out a plan where they can leave and get out of the house. Finally, the guests arrive, and Lucas is nowhere to be seen. We see two of the other servers, plotting an exit and kind of doubting their plans on how they were going to leave or whatever. Now, here is where we have our very first strange occurrence. The scene in which the butler, Julio, is leading the guests upstairs while looking for Lucas happens twice, back to back. And I was watching the film on YouTube. Some pure-hearted person uploaded it, and I was watching it there. And at first I thought there was an issue with the editing, but then I remembered that no, this sort of repetition happens continuously through the movie. And I was talking to a friend about it. His take is that it makes us feel like we're going around in circles, like we're stuck somewhere, and I think that might be true. But anyways, this sort of duplicate scene, back to back, feels really off and just gives a whole eerie vibe to the film. And there's this whole suspense of why the servers want to leave so bad. Why are they all leaving when there's a party with 20 plus people being hosted here? So we go to the kitchen, we see the servers are prepping these extravagant meals, ding, 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 the menu. And the dinner guests are talking about many things and discussing war and stuff. I think it's fair to say that even though Buñuel himself has never properly talked about this film, and it's very open to interpretation, and many great minds have talked about this film, but I think it's fair to say that it's essentially commenting on classism in Spain at the time. Ding, 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 the menu. I'm sure even up to this point you understand the similarities between the menu and here. Let's talk about characters a little bit. Every character in this film, the 20 guests, are these upper class, rich people who are consider everyone else to be peasants, and they're just awful people, same as the menu, where we learn that all these people who are, going to this lavish dinner and have these lavish lifestyles are just awful rich people who don't understand normal folk and whatever. You understand the similarities. Now, let's continue with the film. So, the strangeness continues when we see one of the guests repeat his toast twice. But this time, it's not like a duplicate scene. It's like written in and woven into the show, into the film. So at this point, we're kind of catching on with the repetitiveness of the dialogue and all that. It's kind of fun. The dinner party continues, and we're introduced to our very first lavish dish. Ding, 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 the menu. And we are, quote, awaiting a theatrical entrance for the dish. Ding, 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 the menu. The server falls down while bringing in the dish. This is mainly seen to be a prank planned by Lucia, our dinner hostess. However, some of the guests look kind of confused by this and don't find it very funny. It's not very explained, I don't think. But again, very similar to the menu. We see Lucia head out of the room and start talking about, what just happened with the butler and talking about a bear. I don't know how to say this. And we pan and we see a bear is in the room with them. And then we pan and we see a bunch of sheep under a table, like hiding under a table in the same room. This is very jarring. It's as jarring as I'm explaining it. Like, I know it seems like I'm just making it look like it was really weird, but it's really weird. The symbolism of animals in the Surrealist era is a big thing. Sheep in general are just a very, well-known symbol for people and like for mindless people almost. And we'll get to that in a bit. Just, take a walk with me and we'll get to that. Anyways, so Lucia instructs the butler to take the bear and the sheep out to the garden. And as she's doing this, she catches two of the servers plotting their getaway, trying to leave. And, she's understandably angry at them. The servers ensure her that all is prepped and ready to go, and she asks them why they're leaving and if they're uncomfortable here. And they say no, and they leave. And Lucia threatens to fire them, and here is a very eye-opening scene where we see the little bitch of the butler, the Julio, being the horrible person, throwing the servers under the bus. So something interesting about the characters here is that the servers, who don't really make it into the film, like they're almost gone in the first 10 minutes of the film, are the lower class people in the film. And then we have the upper class people at the dinner. And then we have Julio, who's the butler and is part of the lower class, but he's sort of like a connection between the two. He feels as if he acts the way these rich people do, if he's rude enough to the servers, if he sees people being replaceable the way these people do, I strongly think that he believes he can sort of shift into the higher upper class, which he can't. So honestly, he's the victim in all of this, but I really hate him. He's a very prominent character too. Anyways, we pan back to the dinner table to see that everyone's left to the other room. Everyone's finished dinner and has left to the other room, except for one lady who breaks a window. And there was a moment of surprise, but then everyone's super chill with it and like goes back to what they were doing immediately after. I love this sort of fever dream of a film. Now, this is one of the things I really like about surrealist films. The fact that there's so many different tools to make a film feel eerie and weird and off, and some people just do it better than others. Like the way the repetition is like slowly making you think, oh, something's not right. This doesn't look like a normal film. Or like the little bits of surprises where everyone kind of acknowledges it, but not fully. I love that about surrealist films. And there's something about the menu that just doesn't hit it for me. The fact that it's almost too eerie, it's almost too creepy. You immediately know what's about to happen in this film. You immediately know there's going to be violent scenes in this film. Whereas in a film like this, there's more suspense built in it, and it's just more exciting to me. My favorite director, Charlie Kaufman, I remember had a quote about this where I'm going to try to put it in properly because I don't remember exactly what he said, but he's also known to have these sort of like gimmicks and like surrealist things in his films, but he calls his films realistic. And someone called him out and was like, how is this realistic? Like, if you watch any Charlie Kaufman film, it's very surrealist. And they asked him, like, what makes you call these things realistic? And he said, this is how I perceive the world. And this is how everyone perceives the world. We see life being cartoonish and surrealistic, and we just don't show it in films, and we think that's reality. But me showing you all these things I genuinely feel and see during the day makes it more real to me. And I really butchered that quote, but you know what I'm talking about. I hope you do. I love that. I love that in films. I love when, because I think that's how I experience life as well. I think a lot of the times the weird things you see in these films, you actually do see, but you just kind of, it just doesn't really make sense in your normal view of life. So you just kind of like disregard them. And I love it when these films don't do that. Anyways, yeah. While all of this is happening, we learn little pieces of information about all the guests. There's a lot of secrets and a lot of backstabbing and affairs. Ding, 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 the menu. We see the exact same thing happening in the menu. They're all rich and successful and awful people. And they're all very oblivion to the chaos happening around them and kind of like accept it. I think that's a very strong similarity between the characters in both films. They're both kind of accepting what's happening around them. They're both kind of like just accepting their death. This film is so weird that when I was watching it on YouTube, Pure Soul wrote their master's essay on this film, and they uploaded it to YouTube and subtitled it themselves, like dubbed it themselves. Bless them. I actually DM'd them asking to read their master's essay, but they haven't responded to a comment in like 3 years, so I don't know if they'll see it. But honestly, the film was so strange to a point where I was like, what if this guy's just messing with me? Like, what if this guy just like put on fake subtitles and like made a whole different narrative because I don't understand what they're saying? Anyways, the bougie activities continue. Everyone's sucking up to everyone else, and then someone casually has a dead bird in their purse. I have to say, I love the symbolism of animals in Louis Buñuel movies. The timing and the pace of the film is like very notable. The camera will pan away from a character to show another conversation happening, and then they pan back, and the first character is in a complete different state. And this is not obviously a continuity issue. It's done on purpose to show you how weird the timing of all of this is, and it's an artistic choice to show us how strange and off this universe is. Love it. People are very drunk and tired, and by the way, we're like 17 minutes into the film at this point, and let me know if this is a reach, but there's a lot of talk in this part of the film about like how people are sick, or like this person has this illness and this person has cancer, and I feel like it's just kind of pointing to the mortality of them all. So Blanca, the pianist, says that she wants to leave and goes looking for her shawl. And here is when we sort of transcend into the next chapter of the story. So there's like 20 characters in the film that I did not take the time to like differentiate and like learn about each individual. However, the main hostess is called Lucia, and Lucia has like a partner called Edmundo, but she's also having an affair with another guy. So Lucia's partner Edmundo Lucia's boy toy asks her, what's keeping them here? It's almost 4 a.m. And this is the main question of the film. What is keeping them here? And this sort of like dives into the next chapter of the film. So Edmundo, Lucia's beau, like main beau, seems very content with everyone like staying and like spending the night. And he suggests it, but the guests all decline. Yet they stay the night, but they decline his offer. So I think at this point we still have 3 remaining servers. I'm a little foggy on this part. I'm not sure how many servers we have left, but I think we have 3 remaining servers, including Julio, the main butler. And it's obviously like 4 a.m. So they start turning off the lights and taking off their tuxes, and everyone finds this to be outrageous and like super rude. So it's like kind of pointing to the direction of like these people understand everything in order, understand everything to be like customs and tradition. And it's rude if you take off your tux, and it's rude if you do this. And you're a peasant. You're not allowed to rest if I'm still awake and all that. So everyone's like kind of being super dramatic about this. And then Lucia makes a comment saying that the servers are going to be ashamed of what they're doing later. And Edmundo says, and I quote, "Let us lower ourselves to their level so that they're spared from this shame." Like, if we do it too, they won't have to go through this shame. And he takes off his own jacket. Very interesting. People are going to sleep on the sofas and on the floor, and one lady asks her lover why they didn't leave, and we don't really get a response. So it's all very theatrical. The lighting, the camera shots, the dialogue, the movement. It's so strange, yet the universe is so believable, and you're continuously asking and wondering, why is no one leaving? Someone has like some sort of like a stroke or something. Essentially, someone has something that looks like a heartburn or a heart attack or something, and we dim out and we dim back in to see that it's day now and the servers and the guests are waking up. I believe at this point there's only Julio left. Like, I don't remember seeing the other servers. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they left at this point. And everyone's waking up, the guests are waking up, and Edmundo and Lucia, the hosts, are kind of pissed as to why no one's leaving. So they decide to host breakfast, thinking that after breakfast everyone will leave. Interesting thing here, they don't have breakfast in the main dining room. They have it in the room that they all slept in. So this part's kind of weird. One lady is telling her girls about some like dream she had, in which a bunch of like normies or townsfolk died, and she didn't feel any sympathy for them. Like, she comes out and says, "I didn't feel anything for them." Kind of on the nose. And then the other lady compares the lower class to wounded bulls, saying they feel less pain than, for example, a prince would. Again, priceless writing and a bit on the nose. I'd like to mention there's also a lot of like sexual tension between literally everyone. I don't know if it's because I don't know Spanish or whatever, but it's very apparent that a lot of people are having a lot of affairs. And a lot of secrets are coming out, same as the menu. We have another repetition of dialogue, and then there's a scene here that I found to be very comedic. So the night before, it's not really important to the story, I just thought it was really funny. The night before, we learned that one of the guests has cancer, and another one of the guests is her doctor. And so someone asks the doctor, like, how is she doing? Is she gonna be okay or not? And he says, she's almost completely bald. I don't think she has much time left to live. So remember the guy who had a heart attack right when the night ended? He's very ill and doesn't seem to be living. And so someone asks the doctor, like, how is he? Is he gonna be okay? And the doctor says, I bet he's going to be bald in the next few hours. And then the other one is like, wait, what? And he goes, I don't think he has much time left to live, only a few hours. So the fact that he's just like, he thinks everyone who dies is bald, like, that's cancer. It's, I thought that was really funny. Julio, and then like the response to that is like, oh, you're always right, which is just really funny. So Julio, the butler, says that they don't have a fresh breakfast and that the milk hasn't been delivered yet, which is strange in that universe. And so he's instructed to serve leftovers from the night before. Along with hot coffee. So he leaves to the kitchen to bring all this food. Now, there is an exchange here that's very important, and I think, again, is a leap into our next chapter of the story. Two of the girls asks Lucia where they can change and like freshen up, and she says, in my room. So they all go to leave the room, and they stand at the doorway, and then it pans to three males having a conversation, and one of them says, look, I bet they won't leave. And they look at the doorway, and the girls stay there. They actually, the women don't leave. And I think this is like right when everyone's starting to notice that they like physically can't leave. And it's really strange. So the men start discussing this and ask each other why they didn't leave the night before. And everyone keeps saying, well, no one else did either. No one else did either. Kind of like how sheep would. Like how sheep don't think for themselves and they just do what everyone else says. I don't know. The man who's carrying this conversation and is the voice of reason, is beginning to worry about all of this and asks his friends, do you think it's natural? I'm quoting this. Do you think it's natural that no one left? Do you think it's natural we spent the night in this room, faulting the most elementary duties of the etiquette? Very eye-opening. So the fact that even when he's questioning things, he's questioning why they went against their etiquette rather than questioning why they slept there in the first place is very important in the story. There is a Sherlock Holmes reference here. It really surprised me because I thought Holmes was like really contemporary, or like I don't know, I thought it was like from the 80s or 90s or something, but apparently Sherlock Holmes has been a character since 1887, which is insane. Well done to that franchise. I've never watched a single Sherlock Holmes thing or like read anything, but I might, like, if it's strong enough to have maintained its presence in pop culture since 1887, I believe it deserves a watch or something. Anyways, 3 of the guests find the situation to be super absurd and decide to vamos immediately. Yet once they reach the doorway and are greeted by Julio, the server, bringing in leftovers, they decide to stay for a cup of coffee. Now, at this point, it's kind of obvious that the doorway is very important. It's like there's an invisible barrier or blockage which no one can go through except for Julio, the server. And I would like to add that there is a twist here. Once Julio enters with breakfast and coffee, he can't leave either. Flashback to when I said Julio was acting like a little bitch and throwing the other lower class servers under the bus. So Julio's kind of turning into these people, I guess. I would love there's this YouTuber called Kian Carlisle on YouTube, and he does like really, really long videos on like a single show, like Wizards of Waverly Place, like 5 hours, where he like deep dives, and he'll do this, like, he'll map out the set in both like a funny way and a serious way, where he'll point out every time the director made a mistake, where a character went through one door, should have come out through another, but came out through another. Like, he just kind of like talks about how in low budget shows, no one gives a shit about like the actual set and the map of the place, like the mind map of the place. I would love for him to do a deep dive on this film and explain to me the architecture of the house, because as I believe it, it's a 2-story house at least, and they're on the 2nd level. Like, the dinner party was hosted on the 2nd level. So there's a kitchen, there's a dining room, and then there's a room with like 2 steps that has a piano on top and a living room on the bottom where everyone gets stuck in. That's where they all are. And then the doorway leads out into either the kitchen or the stairwell where you can go downstairs and leave the house. But I could be completely wrong with that. Please, Carlisle, I know you're watching this video. Please do a video on this. Anyways, so the twist was that Julio, the butler, serves the coffee and is instructed by Lucia to get spoons, yet when he reaches the doorway, he stops in his tracks and he doesn't leave. So now Julio is also stuck in the room, guarded by this invisible thing, and Julio is now one of them. Lucia yells at Julio to leave to get the spoons. He tries to go through the doorway. He can't. He sits down right by the ark, and he looks really ill and sad. And finally, some genius guest has the breakthrough that none of them seem to be able to leave the room. It's night again. It's raining now. By the way, we're like 30 minutes into the film at this point, so everyone's freaking out. But they've all kind of accepted that they just can't leave. Ding, 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 the menu. At one point, they're so thirsty, they're like debating drinking vase flower, like flower vase water, which is really gross. And in case you're wondering, they're using a closet as a toilet. I think there's like 2 closets in this living room. Again, KN, if you're watching this, I'm butchering your name, but if you're watching this, please explain to me how the room works. But I think there's 2 closets. Also, there's a lot of like religious motifs in the room, which is very important. Like I think there's a Virgin Mary in the room and other religious motifs in the room. I'd like to add that I read Benoit's autobiography, and he has a lot to say about religion, and the way he was raised religiously. So that's a big deal. Also, like surrealists in general had a lot to say about religion and like the psychological links we have to religion. So that's definitely an important thing that I'm not commenting on properly. So, anyways, another interesting thing here is that one of the guests, says that the fact that their friends and families on the outside haven't like dropped in or checked in on them yet is outrageous and is the most concerning thing. Which is so not true. The fact that 20 adults are stuck in a room with an invisible barrier that they feel like they can't leave for 24 hours is definitely more worrying and concerning than why their family hasn't reached out to them yet. But this just shows their mindset of like the world revolves around us and like that's what's important. The fact that they haven't reached out. Someone even says something like, what if everyone in town has died? Like, it's so unbelievable to these people that no one's like checked in on them for 24 hours that they're like, yeah, I bet everyone's dead. Again, it's eye-opening and it like kind of shows us how they're thinking. Someone asks why the servers left the day before, insinuating that the servers knew something strange was going to happen. This person compares the servers to rats that leave when the ship is sinking. This is like the second time we've had lower class people compared to animals in this film. Edmundo suggests that they don't panic. I kind of love Edmundo. Edmundo suggests that they don't panic and they use willpower to leave, and immediately gets dissed by a guest saying that he's probably doing all this and this is all a prank. This entire bit reminded me of like the 2019 YouTube obsession with like staying in places for 24 hours. What was that? Like, also at this point when I was watching the film, I realized I hadn't left my house in 7 days straight, and which is kind of worrying. So I like took a shower and left the house for like 8 minutes, got some juice, and like came back and realized the only invisible barrier keeping me from the outside world is depression. So yeah, I just had my juice and continued watching the film. So, the film has like incredibly sexist and classist dialogue in it, but first of all, I assume this is normal and expected since it's made in the 60s, but also it's very obvious that we're supposed to hate the people saying these things, so it's not like the film itself is sexist. The horrible characters are saying sexist things. But what was interesting was there's a number of times where they mentioned the word whore or brothel. I found that interesting because in the menu, the only lower class character, or the only character we're supposed to relate to who isn't one of these like rich bitches who doesn't understand anything, is a sex worker. So I thought that was interesting. And then there was a scene where one guy is like clearly having an anxiety attack, and then his like partner or wife or I don't know, sister, friend, whatever, accuses him of being sensitive like a girl. Which is like the story of my life. Like, he's obviously going through something right now. He's like, oh my God, you're so sensitive. You're like a girl. And then the other guy who like had a stroke the night before is dying and is on his last breath and says this: happy that I won't see the extermination. So he dies, and at first I think he's just left there, and at some point they put him in a closet, which is really creepy. There's a dialogue here I found interesting in which one guy says, it would have been better if, right after this guy dies, a character says, it would have been better if like the other guy died, because the other one is like an orchestra director, and they're like, oh, we have too many of those, which is obviously awful, but it's also a flashback to the beginning scene where Julio said that there's a lot of Lucases in the world, as if they're replaceable, as if people are just replaceable. So it seems that even though these people are like the upper class and like the top tier people, they still have class things between themselves as well. They're just awful. Anyways, we understand that like a few days have gone by, like 3 or 4 days have gone by at least, and then the outside world is trying to reach the inside, and the police is involved because they're all rich and famous and like important, and yet no one's been able to actually enter the house from the outside because it's almost like the people from the outside also see the invisible barrier. Then we go back into the house and we see that everyone's in really poor conditions. They're having fevers and they're sick. They haven't eaten anything, and they don't have proper water. Yet they're still kind of prioritizing like customs and traditions and like material things over literally surviving. Like there's a dialogue about how shoes hurt your feet, and there's a scene where they finally break a pipe in the living room so they can have fresh water, and a guy who's like dying goes to have some water, and the other one like pushes him away and is like, ladies first. And it's like, really? Like, he's dying. Like, I think it's okay. So it's very obvious that these people are so out of touch that they, even in a dire situation like this, can't understand to prioritize their humanity. They're prioritizing customs and traditions and etiquette. It's very interesting. I guess the whole film, I don't want to like spoil it, but I bet you've understood at this point, the whole film is kind of explaining how these people associate civilization and them being civilized with absurd material things like the way they dress and their lavish lifestyles and the things they eat, like the feasts they have. And they completely disregard any sort of actual humanity, which is the menu is saying almost the exact same thing. I'd like to mention in the Wikipedia article, I saw that apparently Marilyn Monroe visited the set while they were filming. Isn't it really funny to think of what she had to say about all of this? I don't know. I just imagine there's like this thing in my head where I imagine her going back to her like hotel room with like Arthur Miller and then like quarreling over their take on this film. I don't think they were together at that point, but I wish they were. So, yeah. Anyways, so there's a scene here where they, like I said, they've broken a pipe and they've had their water, and now some of the ladies. By the way, I use girls, ladies, and women interchangeably, and I have no, like, it just doesn't mean anything different in my head, so I hope you understand that. So the ladies are bathing themselves in this, like, pipe water, and now, call me a little pretentious bitch, I'll accept it, but this has to be some sort of reference to the multitude of iconic modernist paintings with the concept of, like, bathers. I'm not going to get into it. It's a whole video on its own, but there's this motif, this concept of drawing bathers that started with the modernism era, and they're visually so similar that I cannot help but think that this was Louis Buñuel adding his own take to the mix. So chaos is still going on. Julio is eating paper at this point and is content about it. Something I love about this is that, about the whole film, is that there's a quote by Stephen King here. I don't remember it. I'll try to find it. But I think when The Shining, the film, came out, Stephen King was really upset about it. He didn't like the adaptation at all. And he said something along the lines of, in the book, you see Jack's descent into madness, whereas in the film, he's already a little crazy from the get-go. He says something about how, in the film, because of, I think Jack Nicholson, right? Because of the actor, he's already got those, kind of crazy eyes, and there's something off about him. So, you already know where it's heading, whereas in the book, it, slowly spirals into insanity. And I love playing with that balance. I love it when people play with that balance, and I've got to say this film does an incredible job at it. The fact that it just starts going slowly, and then it's everyone's just going crazy, and it's it turns into this chaotic thing. Love it. There's a shot here that I loved. It's this lady in the midst of this chaos, not having had food in 4 days, is looking into a mirror and combing her hair. And the way it's shot, the mirror is above the lady, and it kind of looks like a religious painting almost. The way it frames her and is above her and is looking down. The reflection in the mirror is almost looking down at the lady. I love the way it's shot. I think it's very symbolic. And yeah, so she's combing her hair, and a bunch of people really overreact about the way she's combing her hair, like telling her, like, do it full, like you're doing it only halfway, and they're really over dramatic about it. Again, it just shows how they're all just stuck in these like material, unimportant things in life. Everyone's turning on everyone. More secrets and affairs come out. Edmundo is trying to be super democratic as per usual, and it's not working in his favor. There is a moment here that is so savage, and in my notes, I literally wrote down the pillbox throw savage. But I think savage is almost the like perfect word for what happens. So one of the characters is like very sick, and he has like a box, like a metal box full of his medication, and there's a whole subplot where they're looking for this metal box. So one of the other characters sees the metal box, like finds it, and throws it over the barrier so that they can't use it. It's so savage. Like, even in this time of need where like you're literally on Survivor right now, you won't help out a fellow like person who needs their medication, like he throws it over. When I wrote savage, I meant like the 21st century use of the word savage, but actually because the film is sort of showing the descendant, like these civilized people descending into these horrible beasts. I think the word savage is actually very important. The word natural is very important. The word etiquette is very important. The word, all of these. Anyways, there's also a scene here where a guy mentions how everyone smells awful, but like starts off by saying this specific lady smells really bad, which is true. Probably, and they all smell, and that's his argument. Everyone gets really mad at him for saying that this lady smells, and he's like, well, we all smell, like we've been here for 5 days, like why would you think we wouldn't smell? But everyone's so outraged at this comment because again, it shows that these people hold the most stupid things, like the most material things about themselves, to be the best parts and the most important parts of themselves. So them smelling is a big deal. Whereas they haven't eaten anything in like 4 days. Like I feel like that's much more important. There is a fever dream of a dismembered hand, which is very Addams Family of them. Honestly, it reminded me of another film I've watched by Luis Buñuel, and he has a lot of like dismembered things and also just like a lot of like really gross, like gory images like this kind of scattered into films. I think it just adds to the horror value of it all. I love it. It's fun. I don't think it's very important. I don't know. But I remember in the other film I watched, the dismembered body parts each kind of symbolize different parts of our ego and our like, it was essentially like a psychoanalysis thing. Like each dismembered part of the body, like pointed out to some part of our ego or whatever. So maybe this is the same. I don't know. At this point, they've all lost any sense of time. I love that. I think time is a really fun symbol for being a part of society and being civilized. I remember in like Synecdoche, New York by Charlie Kaufman again, the point where you kind of realize that this character is now an outsider to society and has completely disassociated from society is when he loses track of time. Like he has no understanding of the concept of time anymore. I think that's very interesting because time is like the most essential, basic connection between human beings. So they've all lost any sense of time. It just feels like the worst hangover ever at this point. There's a whole scene where someone tries to sexually assault other people, and then the way they deal with it is like with dialogues like, remember your upbringing and let's not be improper, things like that. Again, not really focusing on the fact that this person almost committed a felony and like is annoying other people and like hurting them rather than like focused on how it's improper to act a certain way. Everyone's bullying Edmundo as it goes, and then we see the sheep and the bear going up the staircase, like leading into the room, and all the guests stand in the doorway and stop and stare at the sheep, and it's kind of an intense moment. It's like they're looking in a mirror. So, because, the sheep enter the room and they're captured and they're gonna be killed and eaten by the guests. So it's like they were so stupid. They just went where the other one went, and they could have been free. They could have just gone out and into the garden, but they led themselves to their fate. Very interesting. Anyways, so the sheep finally come through the doorway and into the main living area where the guests are. The scenery changes and we're outside yet again, and we see one of the guests' kids buying a balloon and then attempting to enter the house. So we see a whole crowd of people outside of the house, like waiting on, like behind the invisible barrier of the house, and then this kid runs like inside with his balloon, and he's dressed very proper and like classy for the time, I guess, you know, for a child. And so I guess that's very important. And he tries to enter, he stands there, stares at the house, and then he runs back, and the crowd leaves. So back in the house, they've started a fire to cook the sheep, and we zoom in on like a single sheep, and it's so sad and innocent, like watching this like sheep that's like tied up and is awaiting his death. It's maybe, I mean, there's a lot of like gory images in the film, but this one just got me. Like, it broke my heart. I'm so glad they don't show them actually killing the sheep. Like, I was waiting for that. Anyways, so they, you know, all the crowd goes and stands in the doorway yet again, and they watch the bear roaming around. It's not really doing anything. It's not being destructive. They're just watching it. And again, it's a very intense moment because the camera's in a spot where it feels like they're looking straight at us, like at the viewer, and they're kind of like just like these 20 people, super disheveled and like awful looking, like staring at us, like wishing they could be free too. And then they're like they're starting fights, they're going crazy, they're trying to push each other over the barrier, they're laughing psychotically. At some point, someone else, I think, also dies. I think 2 people die in a closet. I'm not sure, I didn't understand that part. So the bear leaves, and everyone comes to the conclusion that they should kill Edmundo because they feel like Edmundo is at fault here, and this is all because of Edmundo, which is so unfair. Edmundo's not even there. I think he's in the closet or whatever. But the doctor stands up for Edmundo and says that we shouldn't kill him. And there's this beautiful monologue that I think like sums up a lot of the film. And he says something like, if we kill him, the act being killing him, this vile act is not alone. It assumes the end of human dignity, the conversion into beasts. I feel like the expression conversion into beasts really sums up the whole film. Because it makes us ask the question, what is the difference between humans and beasts? I'm sorry, that's very Disney special. But like, really, what is the difference? Because these people seem to have the wrong understanding of the difference between humans and animals. They think that what makes them civilized and what makes them human beings is what they wear and their lifestyles and their lavish foods and feasts and whatever. Whereas we know that's not what makes us human. And I feel like that is literally all of what the menu is also trying to say. So finally, Edmundo comes out, and I think it's Lucia that starts going on this like crazy rant saying that apparently in like the few days they've been there, they've like rearranged the furniture and like moved around 1,000 times as if they themselves were furniture. She literally says the 2 words like us and the furniture, which is kind of cool. Like comparing themselves to inanimate objects, I think is very interesting. And she says something about how so we've rearranged everything in this room like 1,000 times. Us being chess pieces as well, we've rearranged ourselves and our positions as well. But right now, take a look around. We're all standing in the same place we were standing on the first night, and the furniture is exactly arranged the way it was in the dinner party in the first night. And so people start reenacting what it was they did in the dinner party. Like the girl who was playing the piano plays the piano again, same piece, ending up the same piece, plays it again. They have the same small talk, the same like applause, the same like, oh my God, that was so good. And suddenly they feel like they can leave. And I think this is so interesting because it's all a tesseract, isn't it? This whole world, this doorway that they walked into and are stuck there. It's because it's invisible and we don't know what it is. It's not like a physical barrier. It's not like an actual thing keeping them in there. I think that kind of answers the question. It's almost as if they had lost their civilized selves and that's why they couldn't leave. But as soon as they like go back into their routine of like the small talk and the customary things and the piano playing and all these things that are extra in life, once they kind of get back into it, they can leave again. They can leave into the outside world again, and they do. They all leave. They all leave the barrier, and it's really cool. So they leave and they go outside, and I didn't write notes for this part because I was too excited, so I'm gonna have to go off of the Wikipedia article. But yeah, so they leave, they go outside, they see the other servers outside, their family members and all that, and it seems like they went through this sort of like salvation essentially. So the final scene is that we see these people in a cathedral, and they are going through a service, like a religious service, and then the service is over, and then we have a bunch of dialogue insinuating that yet again they can't leave. But it's not just them, it's like a whole group of people in the cathedral that can't leave, a bunch of churchgoers in the cathedral, and then we hear that the military fires on a group of people outside of the cathedral gates, and we see a flock of sheep enter the building, and the screams continue. What a good ending. Can we just applaud that ending right there? What an insanely good climax for that to end. First of all, one of my main, again, I don't want to compare the two films because I don't think they're meant to be compared. I promise I'm not trying to say, oh, this one's better than the other one. I mean, obviously this one's better than the other one, but like I'm just trying to say, like, one of the things I really liked about this film was the ending, and one of the things I really disliked about The Menu was the ending. So a major issue, going back on this, a major issue in The Menu is that although the film is very suspenseful, we're not really waiting for anything. Nothing unexpected happens after the first like bit of the movie. Right after the main girl, who we're supposed to relate with, says to the chef, we're all going to die tonight, and he says yes, he confirms that everyone's gonna die that night. That's exactly what happens. Like, nothing is unexpected about it. There's so much suspense built in the film, yet it never plays out. Like, it feels anticlimactic, even though we have all these like gory like scenes and like violent scenes of people dying. It's so expected that it really doesn't do anything for me. The only unexpected thing I guess you could say is that the girl lives, but like even when like in the beginning when she tells the chef, oh, so we're all gonna die tonight, and he says yes, if you had asked me at that point, I'd be like, except for the girl, because like we knew she wasn't gonna die. I've thought of a lot of like alternative endings to the film. Like, what if, as I think one of my friends suggested this too, what if as the boat was going away, the boat blew up as well? Could have been an alternative ending, still kind of anticlimactic. The issue I have with The Menu is I think the ideas behind it, the menu itself, like the actual menu itself, was so good and was so fun and interesting and entertaining. I just wish the entire story was completely different. Like, I love the idea of this artistic performance of this super absurd thing, and all these like upper class people coming together to be made fun of. The movie we just talked about for 2 hours. I love the idea, but the way they showed it to us was so, I feel like they could have done so much better with it. It's kind of like the Titanic. You know how they tried to I'm gonna be honest here, I don't remember anything of the Titanic. I think I've watched it like once, but I don't even remember it. But you know how they like fit it into another story? Like, it starts off by someone telling a story and then we see the story and it ends. Like, yeah, that's essentially what they did. The main idea of having the menu and like the chef and all these characters was really good, but the way they put it in the story with this outside girl joining in and like us essentially, going through the narrative of this outsider girl was just not well done in my opinion. I loved a lot of things about it. I think it has this sense of pretty violence that I tend to enjoy. Um, Other examples of this is like in American Psycho or The House That Jack Built or Funny Games, where the director has this super like gruesome, gory, vulgar scene, but it's so aesthetically like strange and theatrical and pleasing that you're like, you're just like you can't stop looking away. You can't look away from it. I tend to enjoy that sort of thing, but sometimes I feel like they use it as a sort of like smoke and mirrors type of thing where it like distracts you from the actual plot. And I kind of felt like that was happening with the menu, because although all the deaths and all the violence was really pretty to watch, again, the story was done. Like the story was over when the guy said everyone's gonna die tonight, but we continued to watch it for another hour, I feel like. Um yeah, so I didn't like the ending. I really don't think I need to dissect this anymore or like explain the similarities between this film and the other one. I think it's very obvious that they both have the kind of like same message and almost same like story. I love how in this film, in the Exterminating Angel, they actually can't leave without there actually being like a physical barrier there. Whereas, and they've accepted that they can't leave, right? That's why they can't leave, because they've accepted that they can't leave. That's why they're not leaving. And in the menu, it's essentially the same mechanic where they've accepted that they can't leave. Even the chef says at one point, like, if you had like pushed and like on this or whatever, you probably could have left, but you didn't. You all accepted it. I love that about it. Then why did they have to add things to the menu that like made physical forces made the people stay, like people like guards, or like not there not being any boats, or the door being locked, or stuff like that? Like, why do they have to add that? The point of the story is that these people have accepted that they can't leave. That's why they can't leave. When you add things to it, like a mechanical thing, like a physical thing that like makes you not leave, it just takes away from the story. I guess one thing you could say is that one of the main differences between the two is that in the menu there's actually a character who's trying to leave, um, being the girl, which by the way is so unlikable, and I didn't really agree with her that much. I feel like she was there so I could be her, like I could imagine myself being her, and relate to her. However, she wasn't that relatable to me because she was so angsty from the get-go. Like, I kind of thought the whole pretentious art um installation or whatever it was, the whole artistic performance that was the dinner, was actually really cool. Like, if I were actually there and with the difference being I knew that I wasn't gonna die and it was just a performance, I would have thought it was a great experience. And yeah, the characters are just kind of one note, in comparison to this, where they're all, they don't know they're awful people. Whereas in the menu, they all are. Like, one of them is like literally knew that they were gonna die and still brought this random sex worker there to be killed. Like, that's a murder. Like, that's an awful human being. Whereas in this one, and also something that happens in the menu is that because we have this main guy, like the chef, pushing for all of this, we already have like a good and bad in the film. Like, in the menu, there's the chef and then there's the girl, which I guess sort of turns into the girl's date and the girl, because we kind of almost understand the chef at one point and we kind of want him to kill everyone as well because we hate everyone. But it's too polar. It's too polarizing. It's too much power is or being held by these characters. Whereas in this film, in The Exterminating Angel, none of the characters have any significant power. It's just that it's their beliefs in general. It's a, you'd think to yourself, if you were in this situation, would I be stuck in this room too? Can I actually differentiate myself and beasts and animals, in this situation, would I be able to identify what makes me human? Julio couldn't. Julio went in there and got stuck because he wanted to be like these people. And he saw the consequences of his actions, but he accepted it because that's how bad he wanted to be part of the upper class. Again, Julio is the real victim here. But yeah, I just feel like this film was so much deeper and like so many layers that I am 100% sure I didn't even understand half of it in comparison to The Menu. But, you know, fun film. If someone asked me, should I watch The Menu, I'd be like, yeah, sure, why not? You know, visually it's really cool. The ending is awful. Everyone played pretty well. The dialogue is okay, except for the part where the girl, like, rebels and, like, has the monologue with the chef saying like, oh, you're like everyone else, you're too obsessive and you don't put love in your food, like that's what you're supposed to be doing. And then she orders a burger, which is like the most overused symbol of American consumerism of all time. No one should use that anymore. Like, it died with Pulp Fiction. It lived a great life in Pulp Fiction, that metaphor. But, like, come on, it's 2023. And the best analogy of American consumerism you have is the American burger. Like, ugh. Anyways, I really don't think anyone made it so far. Like, it was a 60-minute video. One take too. I think I need to like edit 2 minutes out and just add a bunch. I think this is gonna be like a 2-hour video. Oh my god. Okay. Anyways, but thank you for allowing me to have this experience. It was really fun for me. Bye.